can learn not just on the same day or the same way. A message from George Evans to you. A pleasant day to all the first listeners we have here today. Thank you very much for tuning in and to the very first episode of our Learning Centered Teaching Podcast. I am Coach Raymond and this is Facilitating Learner-Centered Teaching. So for our first episode, we will talk about the different cognitive perspective, cognitive processes, and classroom processes. Let's start with the cognitive perspective. According to psychologists, we don't just see the world, we actively interpret what we see depending on what we are expecting to see. This statement is related to Gestalt psychology. The essential point of Gestalt is that in perception, whole is different from the sum of its part. Next perspective, the insight learning by Wolfgang Culler. Insight learning occurs when new behavior is learned through cognitive processes rather than through interaction with the outside world. The third perspective we have is information processing theory by George Miller. This processing describes the process by which we take in and remember information. The theory is one of the cognitive approaches to learning as opposed to a behavioral approach. Gagne's 9 events of instruction for conditions of learning are intended to provide teachers, trainers, instructors, and instructional designer with a set of guidelines to create efficient and effective learning experiences. Learning, according to Jerome Bruner's constructivist theory, is an active process in which learners construct new ideas or concepts based upon their current or past knowledge. Okay, so that is for the first part. The second part is cognitive processes, starting with constructivism. Constructivism signifies that teaching involves giving opportunities for learners to explore and discover. Learners construct their own meaning. Constructivism is an important learning theory that educators use to help their students to learn. Next is the transfer of learning or the application of skills, knowledge, and our attitudes that were learned in one situation to another learning situation. Another, David Krathwohl's taxonomy of objectives in the affective domain contains 5 levels from the lowest to highest: receiving, responding, valuing, organization, and characterization. This taxonomy was applied to written self-evaluation to assess changes in effective learning. Lastly, in Paul Torrance' problem-solving and creativity theory, found that learning and thinking creatively takes place in the process of sensing difficulties, problems, and gaps in information. For the last part of this episode, we have here classroom processes, meaning, and types of motivation. Motivation is an inner drive that causes you to do something and persevere at something. Alright, that's it for our first episode. Next time, we will dive in deeper on how we can use this perspective and processes to help you build a better learning environment for your students and of course, a better teaching experiences for you. Keep on learning. I am Coach Raymond. Thank you for learning.